All right, well, welcome everyone. We're super excited for you to be here and be part of this webinar. So, as you all know, today we're going to be discussing how to unlock your Workfront data. Let me just put them in. Yeah, so we'll be discussing how you can unlock your Workfront data by leveraging integrations and reports using BI tools and some other third-party integrations to really kind of take your data to the next level. So, a couple housekeeping items just as we get going. We have a good group here, and with kind of our size of group, we want to make sure that, if you have questions, if you have anything you would like us to dive deeper into, feel free to either come off mute briefly and ask us a question, or you can leave your questions in the chat, which is on the bottom right. And then at the end of the session, we'll be covering any of those questions. Um, the other thing I'll note is if you aren't already, if you click on the bottom right of the screen share, it'll put it into full screen mode for you, just so you're aware of that. And then lastly, I think everyone knows this, but while you're not speaking, if you could just stay on mute. So now just a quick intro to us. My name's Kristoffer. I'm the founder of Pitaya Consulting Group. I'm accompanied here with David, our co-founder, with over 30 years of project management experience and quite a few of those years of Workfront. We're also here with Matt. We're going to be hearing quite a bit from him, our VP of Technology at Pitaya. And um, Pat, unfortunately, wasn't able to make it here live, but we'll be hearing from him via recording that we made with him for one of our demos. So now getting into the agenda, we're going to be starting with, talking about what I like to consider the why or the opportunity that is going to be available based on the solutions we're going to be discussing today. And once we get into discussing the why, then we're going to, transition to the how. How do you actually implement those solutions? So we'll be discussing different BI tools, um, discussing different ways to connect data between Workfront and those BI tools, and then also the importance and significance of data warehouses, basically where you're able to store your data, and then how that interacts with Workfront and the BI tools. We know each organization has different preferences on whether it's a BI tool or where they store data. We're not here to point you necessarily to choose one over the other. It's really, just showing what are the different options and seeing, pros and cons of each and understanding, what's going to work best for you and your organization. Lastly, we'll have two technical demos where we'll dive in and actually show you um, kind of in action what some of this looks like and how powerful this can be. And then, as I mentioned, at the very end, we'll be taking questions. So again, any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. Okay, so looking at the why um, or the opportunity statements, right? I read a interesting statistic the other day that I thought was pretty powerful. It said that enterprise organizations see an average ROI of 299% from integrating their systems, which was pretty eye-opening for me and pretty crazy. Another statistic that kind of goes along with that from Gartner um, is that companies lose $12.9 million annually due to poor data quality. And so you can see how those two statistics relate. Basically, companies when they have poor data quality, not good data, it's costing them millions of dollars. But on the flip side, when they're able to integrate their systems, access good data, um, there's a huge ROI. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today is how you can, access that data with Workfront, with your other systems, um, and leverage that for the benefit of the company. Some questions that we commonly get related to this that you might ask yourself are, how much time are you spending currently pulling reports, building reports? How much time are you spending, looking for data that maybe leadership is asking for, that you're needing for a certain initiative, where you're having to go out and really search for that data and try to, not only find the data, but then understand it and glean the insights from that data. So we're going to be discussing that. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Matt to dive more into the how.
Thanks, Kristoffer. So I wanted to talk about the how. So just talking through these, what we've done is most of us are Adobe Workfront users or are familiar with Adobe Workfront as being that project management tool where we can manage our projects and have great success in using that as the tool. As we know with Adobe Workfront, it shows you the data as things exist today. So looking back, what things look like last month or last year has always been a challenge as far as that's concerned. So we've worked with a number of different clients to help them take a look at that and figure out what is the best ways that they can get the data from Workfront and from any other systems or tools they may use. You may have a CRM like a Salesforce, you may have a financial system, you may have an HR tool like Workday or Bamboo HR, different tools that you may have in your business that provide you different portions of your business that you want to see kind of all in one place. So we've helped different customers be able to integrate or connect those tools and the data from those tools together to provide you a kind of clean and clear view of how things are working within your business as far as that's concerned. So for this demonstrations, we're going to talk with Adobe Workfront being that first. So that we're calling out the OSR, that's the operational system of record. So that's where all the portfolios, programs, and projects are living. Any of the other custom data that you've built into your Workfront, the way that you've adapted and modified Workfront to work for your business is kind of the starting point. We'll run through and look at the different data connectors that's represented by APIs, of the different ways you can get data out of Workfront and in a similar fashion, other systems. Next, we'll take a look at some of the major cloud data warehouses. We've taken a look at the largest ones in the industry that most companies typically work with. And then finally, we'll look at some of the BI tools, the business intelligence tools that help you then create those reports and dashboards that can live on top of that data warehouse and give you an organized view and reports of that type of information. So we'll step through each one of those. So starting with Workfront, we'll go ahead and look at first the Workfront data connectors. Workfront is a powerful tool that many of us have used for many years. And there are 3 different ways that you can get data in and out of Workfront. First is something that Workfront introduced in the last several years is called Data Connect. Data Connect is included with the premium level of licensing and is an add-on at other levels. But it is a package that Workfront has done to help with that data challenge for those that wanted to take the data out of Workfront and bring it into a data warehouse, and perhaps use it with other data sources that they may have. Workfront has partnered with Snowflake. So Snowflake is a major cloud provider that specializes in kind of that data and systems around warehousing large forms of structured and unstructured data. So it's a powerful tool that, and Adobe has made a great connection with Snowflake to do that. So that's one way to do that if you already have that included with your licensing, as far as that's concerned. The second way to do this is with Fusion. Fusion is the much older tool from Adobe Workfront that many of us probably have used from day to day, but is a powerful way to work with data in Workfront. So you can actually transform and replace data or update data, move data around, add custom fields and data, or do other types of scripting or automation in a low code or a no code fashion. So Fusion is a very powerful tool to use for all sorts of reasons with Workfront. But in addition, it can be used to get data in and out of Workfront also. So a Fusion connection can be made to pull that data out and place that into a data warehouse to be used with a BI tool. Fusion is an option that can be included with most licensing plans with Workfront. And the pricing on it varies depending on the plan that you're on and then the amount of usage that is used with Fusion, how much data you're doing or how much of the types of transformation you're doing with the data. We can chat individually with each of you about the different options around those two. The third is that since the very beginning, Workfront has provided robust APIs. The APIs are RESTful connections that allow you to connect directly to your Workfront instance and pull data in or out of that. Obviously, APIs, unless you're a developer, can be a little intimidating, but Workfront has done a great job of documenting those to make them easy to use. And connecting to the right APIs to pull out data related to your Workfront instance is actually relatively easy to do. The Workfront has provided good documentation and a good section in the admin interface on setting up and creating the API, and then being able to connect that API to other systems and tools. And we'll show an example of that later today in the technical demos. So whichever way you choose to get to your data, you can get to your data through the APIs, through Fusion or Data Connect. Different scenarios of either three of these tools will make sense depending on your business, what's included with your licensing or not, and basically where you want to take it or what you want to do with that data. So the discussion around which one of those, I wouldn't say any one of these is best for overall. All of these three have a place or a situation that you may want to use them, and we're happy to discuss those with you. Next, after you've gotten access to the data, you need somewhere to place the data. So major cloud data warehouses we're going to highlight here. So we mentioned Snowflake already with a partnership with Adobe, where they've created the data connection to go ahead and drop that data into an existing Snowflake data warehouse. So that's powerful that that's already built and integrated for you as part of the Premier licensing. So that is one option there for you. Obviously, the other major three, these four together comprise the majority of the market share in the cloud data warehouse market. So obviously, we're familiar with Azure. For those of you that use Microsoft and use Microsoft Teams and the rest of the Microsoft suite, Azure is what is behind all of your data today. Or if you're using Copilot as your AI tool, that is also another Microsoft instance that is using Azure with the data backend. So if you're a Microsoft shop, Azure may be a comfortable place for you to live for your data warehouse. Obviously, the biggest cloud data provider is Amazon. So AWS is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So a lot of people are using today AWS for lots of different cloud workloads and things of that nature. So if you're already using AWS, connecting to AWS is a simple connection with one of those three connectors to be able to get your data into an AWS, like an S3 storage. And there's other things you can do, you then transform it. But AWS is obviously an awesome company to work with, so it's another great solution if you're already working with them. Finally, Google Cloud, for those of you that use Google Workspace to manage your business using your company resources on Google Workspace. Google Cloud is the cloud behind that, and Google Cloud is another great company to work with. So if your data is already in Google, it's another easy one to continue to work with and expand resources and use them as your data warehouse. So again, really big names and big companies here in this space. All of them have the performance and scalability to kind of grow as you need it. They have the cost efficiency, so basically you're only paying for the resources you're using. Each of these companies have great security and governance programs to make sure your data stays secure and protected and only accessible by those people that you designate to access it. And all of these tools have great integration ecosystem compatibility, the ability to get data in and out of not only Workfront, but any of the other major tools you may use within your business are good targets as far as getting data into to kind of have a complete view of your business. With that, we'll move from data warehouses as options to then the business intelligence tools. So we just want to highlight a few. This is not in a 100% extensive list, but this is from a market share perspective, is the major players out in the market today. There are other tools that are good tools also, so I'm not looking to be restrictive here, but just showing you a few of the top names. So for those of you using Microsoft, again, Power BI is their data analytics tool. Is wonderful as a Power BI as a business intelligence tool, excuse me, as far as that's concerned. Tableau is probably one of the older ones on this list. Tableau is one that's been used by many corporations for many decades to get access and to create sophisticated reports. Interestingly enough, Salesforce bought Tableau a couple of years ago, so it's now integrated. And if you're a Salesforce user, there's good options as far as licensing to bring that on as far as that's concerned. Another company here is Domo. May not be as recognizable, but it's another company here. We're based in Utah, and as a Utah-based company, Domo was created to help solve the problem of taking care of being not only the business intelligence tool, but to be cloud-based and to be also the data warehouse behind it. So they take care of all of that. So their goal is to be a tool that's very easy to use. If you haven't selected a cloud provider or a BI tool before, you can get that all in one easy to use package, and you don't have to have sophisticated developers to work on your teams to work on that. So that's one we'll show in one of the demos also. And then just for completeness, we've also added Looker, which is a Google tool. So if you're a big Google fan and using lots of different Google products, Looker is their BI tool within their suite that runs on the Google Cloud. And then finally, for those Amazon users, Amazon QuickSight is their BI tool that is used in conjunction with AWS and a few other major Amazon type tools that are out there. So just for completeness, we wanted to add in those last two, but we're going to focus more on a couple of the top three today. With that, that just shows there's different options there. So what we've kind of shown you is that there are different connector types from Workfront. There are different warehousing or data warehouses, so there's different cloud providers you can choose, and there's different BI tools. And for each company, kind of walking through those scenarios of understanding what licensing do you already have built in with these companies, what experience or teams do you have using these tools already today, is going to be part of that conversation of which would be the best tool for you to use. Each of these tools have their strengths and weaknesses, and so it's good to take a look at that and look at that within your existing suite of tools that you have today as you look to expand out. With that, we'll go ahead and move next into the demo portion of that. Now that we've covered some highlight of kind of the major tools that are required for that, we've asked Pat to go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, he had a family commitment today. Wasn't able to join at this time. So we've pre-recorded. So Topher and I met with him yesterday and had him pre-record his part of the demo. So he's going to demonstrate what was used at another client that we assisted previously. So we'll turn it over to Pat for a minute. And then in chat, if you're not able to hear it, go ahead and pop into chat, and David and Topper can help if needed.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Malone, and today we'll go over the integrations between portfolios, programs, and custom reporting and data integrations with Workfront. Built into Workfront are some great customizable reporting. However, the data is live snapshots. It doesn't technically show historical changes, nor does it automate unrelated data fields. However, with Workfront Fusion, there is a tight integration with Workfront, and it allows for the automating of actions as well as integration with other systems and or warehousing of that data. Since Fusion uses the built-in Workfront APIs by default, there's no need to learn the data complex integrations and automations like you would as a normal programmer. It's usually just point and click. For example, I had a client that wanted to trigger a billing process on an external system based on a status change within Workfront. Fusion is able to create this automation with little or no knowledge of programming using that REST API functionality with a button click. However, when it comes to tighter integrations or reporting is necessary with other systems, the REST API can be used directly. This API is extensive and it provides normalized relational data that is standardized for easy integrations. And when it's integrated reporting with a need for a historical data change, there are other additional required analytics that the API can be used for to copy and or snapshot that data into a warehouse like Azure. In that instance, Azure services like Logic Apps and Power Automate and Azure SQL can be used to make for an easy integration into external systems. When it comes to dashboarding, especially data cross-referencing external systems, such as staffing, billing, inventory management, the API allows for direct export of calculated or raw data directly from Workfront. It's been in my experience that Power BI really easily integrates the API with up to about 100,000 records in a single poll. But beyond that, using an integration and automation system like Logic Apps, you can keep an updated data warehouse updated with allowing other systems like Power BI to make direct queries against a refresh. And if you use the API, sometimes it can take several minutes to refresh. However, if you're refreshing against a data warehouse, then you can reduce that down to seconds instead of minutes or hours. On the next slide, in this Power BI example, here we go. The API is used to push HR data like resource costs and reporting managers into Workfront. And then Power BI itself connects directly to that API to build a full org chart. That org chart is shown on the left-hand side here and allows you to select individuals or entire teams. For this instance, the historical month-to-month view of productive utilization is shown. And this client has set a target for 80% productive or billable utilization. The data being displayed is not only historical, but also the scheduled availability based on resource assignments inside of Workfront is shown projecting into the future here. This was used to give visibility into staffing resources by country. It also allows them project staffing needs for hiring and booking, especially for projects that have not yet started. The visibility into this gives a much better focus on not only just the individual, but team performance, and then allows the management to make better decisions on whether or not the staffing needs are being met or if there are adjustments that need to be made. And with that, I'll hand it back to Matt.
I hope everybody could hear that okay. So thanks, Pat, for recording that. Just in that instance, so with that client we were working with, so you could see that using Azure as the data warehouse and then using Power BI. So just from a cost perspective, just so we can cover that, this particular client had several thousand active projects, so kind of a large Workfront instance from as far as how busy it was with that many active projects. But given this is all just a simple text data that is coming from Workfront, it wasn't a large amount of storage on Azure. So I believe the SQL instance was less than a couple hundred per month for both the SQL and the storage. So the storage that's attached with Azure SQL, and then obviously the Power BI licensing, depending on your enterprise license with Microsoft, that's usually less than $100 for those developer per month licenses for any of the developers you need that are going to build and create those complex reports like Patrick was showing. And then obviously there's a viewer license that's normally included with most enterprise Microsoft licensing that as the management team, you can go in and see and run those reports, gather your information, export it to other places, put it into PowerPoints, things of that nature. So that client found that very helpful. We'll show some of the results from a financial perspective after the second demo. But just wanted to show you that as the first example of using Azure and Power BI as, and then either Fusion and or the API as the connector of that type. Oops, here we go. We'll go ahead and move to the technical demo number 2. So I'm going to show you on this one. So on this one, again, we're starting with Adobe Workfront as the starting point. And then we're looking to use either the Fusion or REST API connector to then connect the data out of Workfront and then get the export of Workfront different objects. So if you're familiar with the portfolio programs and projects, you can export any of those individual object data out from Workfront using that connector. And then in this case, we're going to have AWS be the storage on the back end, where you can then set up daily and monthly snapshots of this data. And then on the front end of that, using Domo, Domo is going to coordinate that AWS storage portion and the snapshots, and then allow you to do the no-code UI creation, and then also be able to create those reports and dashboards. So those are the tools that we're going to use for the second demo. So this is for a different division, a different client that we worked with, where they had this need, and we found that Domo and the APIs in this case were the best fit for their usage. So with that, I'll go ahead and show just some screenshots from Domo, and then after a couple of screenshots, I'm going to jump in directly into Domo Live. There's always a risk doing a live demo on a webinar like this, but we'll go ahead and give it a try. But I had a few screenshots here first. So within Domo, within your instance of Domo, they have a lot of pre-built community connectors where a lot of people have built out connectors to different popular tools, and Workfront from Adobe is one of those. So these are different ones that are built. In this case, I used the second connector, the one called the Workfront connector, was able to connect with an API key that I created within Workfront to then connect to that. So what I'll show you in our live demo is our Adobe partner Workfront instance connected to our Domo demo instance. So these are 2 demo accounts, so we've just got some dummy data in there. It's not as exciting as all of your data would be from Workfront, but just to show you the capability that we've created this demo with with some dummy data as far as that's concerned. So setting that the connector isn't that difficult once you understand how to work with the APIs and get the API connected. Once you got that API connected, it then pulls in the data Domo has built out some great AI features where it can then take a look at the data that you've brought in and understand what kind of data is there and recommend some visualizations, what they call cards, or we call a report for that, and then to organize them into multiple reports into one dashboard is the language that Domo uses. So this AI was extremely helpful. Within a few minutes, it had recommended 45 different visualizations that I may want to use. I went then and selected a few of those visualizations for today's webinar that we could then use. You can then use those visualizations as the starting point. You can then go in and modify those reports, update to the different types of fields you prefer to see. You can also, after you've set up that snapshotting, set up that time slicer on it so you can move forward or back in time. You can say, what does the data look like today? What did our project data look like last month? What did it look like last year? You know, once you have that data in there. So that's a real handy feature with Domo, and it makes it very non-technical. You don't have to have the same level of data analyst or same type of programmer or developer on the back end to build that if you're using a tool like Domo. Finally, here's a view of those. So here's a few of those reports that I selected. So I just grabbed a screenshot. So this is from the data that it pulled in from Workfront, from that API. It then went ahead and suggested some reports I may want to have. So then I was able to look at them and find the ones that I would find helpful at that point. So with that, let me go ahead and switch my screen over to the live demo. All right, I've switched over to Domo, and can I get a thumbs up if everybody can see that okay? All right, thank you on that. So this is a live instance of a Domo. This is, again, a demo space. So it's you can see this is where I've built a dashboard. So this is a dashboard. These each are called cards, or what we'd call an individual report in here. So this is kind of the end state of that. Let me go back and roll that back from showing what we had built initially. So I'm going to come in here and show you a bit from the data warehouse side. So Domo is great in that they work with all the major different cloud providers. By default, this data is going to live on AWS. That's Domo's default data warehouse that they've are working with and pre-built in with their licensing. And you can see the different connectors and the data that's living in there. But you have other ways of getting data in here. If you have information in, say, Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, where you've been doing a lot of reports by hand, you can use that data that you've collected over months or years, and you can actually seed that data into Domo also. So you can bring that in if you want to kind of do your first pass of building your history while you work to then create the longer term structure with that. So that's great that you can bring in data from different sources. You can obviously connect something like Salesforce or a bunch of other different tools like this. So you can have the different data here in your warehouse of where the data is being connected from. And then you can then transform or connect the data together. So let me show you an example of that I've done with the Workfront data. So you can see with here, so you can see with the Workfront logo here that I've gone ahead and brought in the Workfront project data, the Workfront program data, and the Workfront project financials. So I did connect with the API and did pull that in from our demo. So you can see the number of rows, the number of data that I actually brought in. Obviously, our demo instance is not very large. There's not a large amount of data in there, but I'll use this project data to show you an example of what you can then do with that. So in this instance, we'll go ahead and take a look at the data. So you can see this kind of looks like a spreadsheet, but this is basically all the data that is in that project object from Workfront. So all the names of the different projects and the information that's there and all the different fields here. So I'll quickly scroll over, but you can see you can quickly look at, visually see the data and the types of data that it is, and you can then change how the data is classified, get it ready for reports. So with the date field, or if it's a financial field, you can have it designated as such, so that the proper calculations of things can happen as you create visualizations on that. Once you've created that data import to create that, you can do a number of things. And let me show you an example of a data flow that I created yesterday, just in anticipation of this. Let's see here. Let's go into this, and let's go ahead and edit it. So this I'm going live in. So this is how you would then do what's called ETL, or extract, transform, and load. It's common data analyst type work. It's basically you've got your raw data that you want here, and you want to transform it into something that will be useful for your reports. So in this case, for those familiar with Workfront, we have our project data, But we know that programs is another object, but I want to know what program are my projects in. So I want to join this data together. So basically I took the Workfront project data and then I joined it with the Workfront program. So then I have a joined version of that data that shows all the project data, but then it's then specifying information about the program it belongs to. I could then do the same thing with a portfolio. I could go grab that connector, go grab my portfolio information from Workfront and do that. So any of the objects you want from data from Workfront, you can then go ahead and grab that, and then you can choose how you combine or join that together. After I had joined the data, I said, okay, that's good, but Workfront is only feeding me that data, and I've got Domo here querying that data once per day from Workfront. So every day this data is getting overwritten or refreshed. But I want to make a snapshot. I want to start building a history of this data. So then I went in and did this snapshot feature that Domo has to then go ahead and take this, and once per day after this data is imported, joined together, I am then taking a snapshot of that and storing that in my data warehouse. So this then becomes my daily view of that same data. So then as I build reports, I can then reference that, and then I can then choose to have a filter on my report to say, what does the data look like today? What did it look like yesterday? What did it look like last week or last month or last year, once that data starts to build up over time? Obviously, you need to build up that snapshotting and allow that snapshotting to occur for a period of time to allow you to be able to go back in time, unless you precede it with, say, some Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets that you've had where you've stored that type of data in the past on that. But that's basically the scenario of how you would bring the data in, transform it, and then create that snapshot. So you could then create that historical archive as far as that's concerned. So I'll go ahead and save and exit out of this area. Oops, let me exit also. And then we'll come back to the dashboard. So now you've seen kind of the data coming in, where it's stored in the warehouse, and you've seen some of the transformation that can happen with it. Let's go ahead and back and look at that visualizations. So you can create visualizations on the fly. So you can go ahead and choose to create your own visualizations. Again, these are the ones that I had pre-built with the Domo AI to do those. You can come here and you can see with the tool, I can then go ahead and edit. I can change it. So maybe I don't want a pie chart, I want a bar chart instead. Those are easy things that can be changed on the fly by updating or changing this particular card as far as that's concerned. Additionally, you can also filter down on the data. So as you're looking at the data, you can then work to drill down on it. So say, for example, I've connected these two cards together. You can then click on that and say, I want to know that all of those that have this status on that. And so you can see my data is then updated. I can filter or sort the data in this chart and say, well, actually, I want to see the data that meets these two conditions that are both in these two statuses on basically their project condition to do that. Or I can just reset it back and just look at all of the data itself. So you can see up in the top, it's putting that filter, but you can click on it on the fly and do that. You can modify it. You can change it to a different type of chart or report as needed. And then the nice thing also is you can also send and export it. So if you want to send this to an email and say, hey, David, I want you to take a look at this. Our revenue numbers are down for the month. Let's go take a look at this. I can email it or I can print it. I can send it to Excel to do some deeper diving, or CSV if I want to take it somewhere else. Or if I want to put it in PowerPoint, I need to do a management report and review that with my management team every Monday. I can take this same report that's here, that's built, and it's going to be refreshed automatically as the data continues to be ingested on a daily basis. This report will continue to update, so I can always see the latest information, or I can change it back to a point in time. So for example, on this filter, I can sort that. For example, I've got it set to look at yesterday's data. Obviously, this data isn't terribly interesting in our demo instance, but I could change it to a different time frames. I could change it to something like today. So I can go back and forth in time to kind of see the data at different times, and then go ahead and grab and capture that view, save it into my PowerPoint, or send it an email to different people to take a look at it. You can then share these dashboards with people, so then the different people, different management or other teams that are part of your organization that need to see these reports, they all can have access to it. And you can choose who has access to view those reports, and then who has access to then manipulate or change or build new reports. So there's good granularity on the user control on what you can do with that. So just wanted to show that as, again, as another option. If you haven't seen Domo before, we just wanted to show you that as an option in addition to Power BI or Tableau, which many people are probably more familiar with. With that, I will go back to the presentation here. Can you get a thumbs up? Are we back on the presentation now? Okay, thank you. So then just as a follow-up to these two technical demos. So again, we tried to bring out the client sensitive information. That's the hard part about doing demos, is to remove the client specific information. But we want to talk about the real world situations behind each of these technical demos. So the first one that Pat showed, so by creating that utilization graphs that the management team of a large organization was able to use, when we talked to the VP of that organization, in that first year that they came onto Workfront and established that BI reporting, they recognized over about $2 million in cost savings by having that better visibility of their business and being able to track the utilization in that fashion. Additionally, by having the individual managers be able to track their team's utilization and seeing what projects were coming in, they were also able to drive a 20% increase in utilization. There were less people that were idle on the bench because they were able to move people around, seeing what projects were coming, getting the people with the right skill sets in the right place, and also understanding when to trigger hiring conditions, knowing which teams were growing and when they would need another engineer of this skill set or that skill set. At the end of the day, because of those changes for that division, they realized a 4% year-over-year improvement in gross profit. Just by those cost reductions and better utilization of the teams or resources within that department. So that's the technical demo number one, some of the real world data that behind the benefits of using Workfront and using these BI tools. The second on that demo two, using that Domo instance, so the client that we worked with on that one, they wanted to kind of dig deeper into the financial data. They weren't happy with the financial reports that they had between Workfront and their ERP systems. So they wanted to build that up, but didn't want to hire a fleet of data analysts or reporting teams to do that. They had existing reporting teams, but they were overwhelmed and weren't able to spend time on that. So by implementing Domo, it allowed more non-technical users in the finance and the management team to work on this. Within that first month of bringing up Domo and creating some custom reports, they found just under $1 million in unbilled revenue that they were able to then identify and get billed. So money that may have been left on the table was immediately identified in the first month, which paid for that tool for perhaps 10 to 20 years, perhaps. Additionally, the additional reporting effort created these standardized reports so the KPIs that team had could be reported on in a standard fashion. The estimate from that management team was that they were saving over $20,000 per month in reduction in cost by basically not having to have the data analysts, not having to have the management team go run ad hoc Excel reports and create a graph or something like that to hurriedly throw into a management report. They then had a standard place to go to that had the standard reports that were measuring the key financial KPIs that they were interested in. So those are some of the real world data behind those clients that were the ones that were actually consuming those. Obviously, we had to abstract that and show just some dummy data, basically, but we wanted to show you some of those types of the way those reports and the way those things looked. With that, want to come up to just to summarize. We've covered the technical demos today to kind of show you some live instances of using some of those tools. Again, each of those tools will be a good fit for one company, but other tools will be a better fit for other company. So we're not here to tell you that you have to use this tool or that tool. We're happy to chat with you about your particular needs and challenges that you have today and figure out which of the many tools that we've recommended would be the best fit for your organization. So you can understand how you can get the data out of Workfront by using Data Connect or the Fusion or the API connections. You can pick which data warehouse you would use, whether it's Azure, AWS, Power BI, Snowflake, and then you can look at the BI tools like Power BI, Domo, or Tableau that we showed today. So with that, we want to go ahead and leave some time for some questions and answers, and we can jump back into some demos too if there's more questions. Do you want to see some things more in depth? But before we jump into the Q&A, David, I think you had wanted to make a few comments up front, so I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Yeah. So first off, I want to see is anyone able to unmute and or is willing to test and see if they can unmute themselves so that if there are questions, we can get those. Or can you only go into the chat? And hopefully you can even go into the chat.
Hear me?
Yeah, Brandon.
So I had a question about, is data warehouse required, or with Fusion, can you directly connect from like Power BI via like an API call?
So
Yeah.
Fusion,
Great question. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, Fusion you can. One of the issues is that in the end, you're pulling data directly from Workfront, and it's always going to be real-time data. So you always need to have some type of a data warehouse or some way to get that historical data if that's what you're looking for. If it's all real-time, absolutely, you can use Fusion or a direct API, either one.
Yeah, and the other point I'd mention on that, Brandon, is in addition to be just the live data, so it doesn't give you the historical archive option, so that's the value of that warehouse. Also is just Fusion has certain timeouts and certain data limits built into that. So we did find at about the 100,000 record limit. So if you have more than 100,000 data points that you're pulling through Fusion, you may start to see some degradation on the Fusion side, or you may, I know Pat had to do this for the client at first. We did some recursive Fusion calls, waited a few minutes and called again to make sure we had the full data set into that. But over time we found actually moving to the API allowed us to be more prescriptive on which data points we need to pull, and we could pull a larger data set with that. So it just depends on the size of the volume of the data, and also if you're looking to do historical analysis, those would be some challenges you run into, but you absolutely don't have to have a data warehouse in place if you want to make these connections and kind of do them directly for going into Power BI directly, or one of these other BI tools where a data warehouse isn't absolutely required. A great question, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, David. Hi, Matt. So I have one question. So how are we connecting to Snowflake database? So are we using REST APIs?
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard all of that question. I heard something about REST APIs and databases. Do you mind restating one more time?
Yeah. So we are fetching the data from the Snowflake, right? Sometimes like if the customer is having the large database in Snowflake, so how we are connecting the Snowflake to Fusion?
Yeah, so there's a couple options there. So connecting Snowflake to Fusion. So if you have Snowflake already, now Adobe with Workfront has created what's called Data Connect. So it's like an enhanced Fusion connector already. So if you have Data Connect already included with your licensing, that's a clean way to use that directly with that. So then basically in the Data Connect setup, you're going to set up from your Workfront instance in Data Connect, you're going then to connect that to your Snowflake instance, and that will then allow that data to traverse through Data Connect, which is essentially a very fancy Fusion connector. If you don't have Data Connect, you can use Fusion also. So basically in Fusion, you will then set up the connection to then from Workfront, then create that Fusion connector to then go out to your Snowflake instance and do that. And David, I don't know if you want to describe that a little bit better. And I know you and Pat are a little bit more experienced on setting up the Fusion connectors. Do you want to describe creating or setting up a Fusion connector to send data out to a data warehouse like Snowflake?
Oh, yeah. Got it.
Yeah, Dave.
So I think
Yeah, Dave.
we need to ask the Adobe to enable the data connect for our instance. So we are having ultimate plan, but I don't see the data connect module in Fusion.
Right.
That's
So
correct.
usually
Yeah.
what you end up having to do is if you have Data Connect, the first thing is you need to usually create a separate data warehouse or enhance what you have with Snowflake so that you can pull the historical data and store it. So basically, not pull it, but capture data every day or every month. After that, you can use the API, and with Snowflake, in this case, usually you have to use the custom API module to actually go connect to Snowflake and then pull the data directly that way.
Thank you. That's interesting.
Yeah, and these are interesting scenarios, and just as always, we're happy to set up a separate call with any of you just to kind of walk through what are the challenges you're seeing. We're happy to provide some advice and see if we can help guide you, given the experience we've done helping other clients find a way to connect. So feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to set up a call with you to talk through your specific scenarios as far as that's concerned.
And we're going to be sending out an email follow up on this with the slides and any other information that we have that we wanted to share with you. And so we'd like to also request if there's any time that you'd like to go through and talk about what we've said, what we've talked about, see if there's anything that we can help you and your organization with, and then we'd love to do that as well. Are there any other questions? I know we still have time.
So something just to mention with Data Connect, I did look into that, and can't remember which tier of Workfront you have to have for that to work. But so we didn't have the right, we were not on the correct tier of subscription for it. So
yeah, it's usually the ultimate package that Workfront now has, or Adobe has for Workfront, to be able to get Data Connect with that, and so that you can then have access to that through the Snowflake.
But if that's not an option, if that's not something from a licensing standpoint you're looking to do, there are other ways to do that. So again, we can walk through with either with Fusion or with APIs, other ways to do that. Data Connect is great in what Adobe has created there, but it may not fit every client's needs, and so we can walk through what would be the best fit for you, and kind of what your need, or particularly given the size of data and kind of the current licensing that's in place today. Thanks, Brandon, for another question. Thanks, Siobhan, too. Any other questions? All right. Toffer, were there any other things that we had thought of as far as other questions we wanted to, or other things we thought of that might be common interests?
You already kind of discussed relative costs. I don't know if you want to touch on that again. And another common question we get is just, how long does it take to, implement one of these solutions?
Yeah, okay, that's great. I'll cover both. So first, on the cost perspective. So with any of the solutions, you need to look at the licensing costs first on the connectors. So as we talked about, Data Connect is included. I believe David said the ultimate package. I was using the wrong name on that one. I've changed the name several times, but look to see if that license is included or not within your licensing. So getting that. Fusion, obviously, there can be some monthly costs associated with that, depending on the size and volume of data that is coming out with that. API looks to be free as far as that's concerned. So that's your first part. Your second part, with your data warehouse, there are different fees, different consumption fees with the amount of storage and any other, if you have to set up any virtual machines like a SQL for Azure, for example, there could be some costs associated with that. I mentioned an example with the demo one, that client was paying around $200 a month for Azure's licensing for the cloud, for that amount of storage, for that many records, and to do the transformation of data. Since they were well over 100,000, they were pulling several million records on a monthly basis. So that amount needed to be stored in the cloud, and that's why they needed that permanent data warehouse, because of the historical nature that they wanted to track of that and of those things. And then on top of that, after your cloud licensing is then your BI tool licensing. So both Tableau and Power BI have enterprise licensing models that basically build in basically a price per user. So depending on the type of user, whether it's a developer user, it can be up to $50 to $100 per month per user. If it's a different type of user or viewer license, those are much lower cost, if not free, if included with other enterprise licensing on that. So just need to take a look at that full situation as far as that's concerned. Domo is priced a bit differently since it's doing the data warehouse and the BI tool all in one. They have a consumptive model. Basically, you're paying for the number of credits used on a yearly basis. Most clients that you set this up, they're usually in the around $2,000 a month type of range to have the full tool. So it has the data warehouse and the BI tool and everything in there. And the number of users is unlimited. The amount of storage is basically more than anyone is using today for a typical Workfront installation. But again, we can look at those type of parameters with each person and see kind of what is the size of your teams, how big is your data, those type of things to help you size that out and understand which tools you're most comfortable with, and then which tools make sense from a pricing standpoint as far as that's concerned. And then as far as implementation timeframe, as far as getting the data connected, that part takes some experience. So working with Data Connect the first time, working with Fusion, working with the APIs is a little daunting if you haven't done that before. But if you have, or if you want, we can help guide you through that experience. It doesn't take very long. For example, what I showed you in the Domo instance, I worked to reset up again yesterday. So just in an hour or two yesterday, I was able to get the API key set up, connected, the data pulled in, and a few brief visualizations done as far as that's concerned. Most of the work is then in the visualization stage. Once you get the data structure set up, you get the data coming over and being snapshot, it's then working to understand what are the visualizations or what are the reports that the team actually wants. How do we fine tune those to build the right types of reports and dashboards in whichever BI tool you've selected? That's where a lot of the work takes. So getting things set up and connected and getting a few simple reports can be done in days and weeks. And then kind of fine tuning, doing longer things can take some time as that historical data, and then as those teams get used to working with those type of reports, they start to think of more things. It's like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we also had a report that did this, or if we could look at these two different silos of data information and put them together so we had one complete view. Work with a company that wanted to track their projects from inception, so they were using Salesforce as their sales tracking tool, and then come into Workfront as their project management tool, and then it'll go into SAP as their financial tool. So they wanted to track that project from cradle to grave. So then building the different data connectors for those three systems, and then matching that data together. What's the unique identifier that identifies that customer and that project across sales to operations to finance? How do we then track that to make sure we have a complete view of that customer and that project? So that was an interesting challenge to kind of figure that out, get those data sources in, get snapshotting of that data, and then be able to show reports across major systems like that.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate that you took the time, and hopefully you found some value out of this webinar. And we're looking to do some more here coming up. Would love any feedback or thoughts that you have as well that you can provide us just through email as we reach out to you. So hopefully you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to talking with you some more.